of Computer Science at the University of Nottingham, and I'm also the academic lead for the Nodes Cross-Cutting Theme, or CCT. I'll tell you a bit about the CCT before we do what Ram just said there, which is digging into the fieldwork findings. So the CCT is characterised by 3 work packages. One of them that seeks to translate between social and technical perspectives on task governance. The second one that enables or seeks to enable responsible innovation. And the third that informs design through ethnographic studies or field work. So in terms of the first work package, that's led by Lackland, whose face you can see on the slide there, and it's focusing very much on assessing the alignment of proposed technical developments with existing and emerging regulation. So progress to date has involved mapping governance concepts to understand key themes that govern task development, or may well govern task development. We've reviewed and consolidated a wide range of literature on governance strategies, for example, legislation, policy, regulatory guidelines, codes of ethics, etc. And we've clustered our analysis around gaps in understanding between legal, technical and sociological perspectives. Now this has surfaced the very strong equation of trust with risk management in governance strategies, and that the achievement of trust is going to, or certainly implicates, not only system design but also wider governance institutions involved with oversight. We've also, as part of this exercise, been examining the proposed EU AI Act, which elaborates how legislators aim to create an ecosystem of trust by adopting a risk-based approach to the regulation of AI. And on the basis of this, Lackland has been working on a number of design provocations, which are listed on the slide there. I'm not going to go into them because Lackland can talk about those later today in one of the other sessions, in the legal sessions. Well, that's the work that's going on in terms of WP1. In terms of WP2, which is led by Robin Williams, again, you can see on the slide, well, this is focusing, as I've said, on responsible innovation for task development, and it seeks to inform developer, regulator and stakeholder thinking and practice. Progress to date involves a pilot study of the Scottish Optometry Network, or SCON, which is developing a repository of retinal images and AI-based diagnostic tools. I think, interestingly, Robin tells me that initial results identify strong support amongst community opticians for this work, with the caveat that attention is given to training, remuneration structures, and a complex array of commercial and informational governance issues. So not promising, but not straightforward, and lots of issues to tackle there. And of course, you can find out more if you want to about this by talking to Robin. And Robin's also organising a workshop in December to explore governance challenges, particularly around software as a medical device. So if you want to contribute to that, please contact Robin on the email address there. And you'll find further information in due course on the website as well, I'm sure. Okay, so work package 3, well, that focuses on informing design through ethnographic studies. The scope of our studies is relatively straightforward. We aim to leverage ethnography to investigate and elaborate governance challenges that confront autonomous systems from the point of view of current practice. So we're not interested in divining the future, but in what we can learn from current governance challenges that confront autonomous systems development and deployment, and how these might inform and shape the future governance of autonomous systems. For those of you who don't know what ethnography is, well, basically it's a qualitative social science approach. It doesn't trade in statistics and general patterns and trends, but instead drills down into specific human activities, practices and reasoning in specific settings. Ethnography has been used in a systems development context for well over 40 years now. It's an established means of understanding the social context of systems development and deployment. It's been widely used to understand user requirements and to do in the wild evaluation of systems. And it's been adopted in industrial practice by companies such as Xerox, Microsoft and Intel, to name a few. Now, ethnography typically involves fieldwork or the immersion of a researcher in and the direct observation of human activities, which is obviously highly dependent on people letting us access settings and sites of interest. Now, that's a particular challenge in this context, as there's a lot of sensitivity around autonomous systems. So to date, our studies have been limited to informal interviews. Observations may follow if the people and indeed the companies they work for are willing to let us through the door, and if it's of strategic benefit. And that might be benefit to both of us. Companies often learn things about what's going on with especially large organisations through fieldwork. There could be real value. So there may be value to both parties here, not just the node. There may be value to the companies that engages as well. So it's also the case that our current studies, or one of them at least, is bound by a non-disclosure agreement. So in what follows, I'll treat all things as equal and talk in general terms rather than identifying details. Suffice to say here that if you face governance challenges in your own work and you're willing to share your experiences with us, then please let us know. You can contact Ram or myself on the email address below. We can be very flexible. If you just want to talk, that's fine. And we can wrap things up in an NDA to manage the sensitivities involved if we need to. There we go. Okay, so let's take a look at what we've been doing and finding. Before I dive into the findings, I'm just going to say that the work I'm reporting here was largely done by Glenn McGarry. You can see him on the slide there. Glenn has had a steep learning curve in autonomous systems, I think it should say, having recently completed his PhD thesis on music production. So quite a change of scene for Glenn, and indeed a big thanks for his effort in getting to grips with some very complicated ideas. Now, the first study we did involved a discussion with a cybersecurity expert working for an international electrical systems company about automated braking systems on increasingly autonomous vehicles and their trustworthiness. Now, discourse surrounding autonomous systems frequently frames trust and trustworthiness as a technical concern, something to be assured through training, testing and verification procedures and regimes. Our findings from this study frame trust around safety and its potential legal demonstration, and highlight a number of observations that render this achievement problematic, as I'm sure you can tell from the quote on the slide if you've had a chance to read it. Now, before we delve into these observations, I have to say that any error or mistakes in articulating these observations are ours, and indeed mine. I'm the one doing the presentation, they're not our interviewees, and I've also got to say that we don't have time to do full justice to those observations. This is just a short talk after all, but there is a more detailed report that sits alongside this presentation, and I'm sure it will be made available after today. So, observation one then. Well, the first observation, which makes it problematic to legally demonstrate that an autonomous vehicle is safe, is that there is a significant gap in engineers' understanding of the complexity of the systems on such vehicles, on cabs. Yeah? As you can see from the quote on the slide, the engineers, not just one, many involved in this chap's work, were signing off on ABS systems that were not, and they were not aware, in doing so, that the sensors were augmented by machine learning, let alone that machine learning could introduce significant vulnerabilities compromising vehicle safety. Now, that might beg a belief, but such is the complexity of autonomous vehicles, a point which our interviewee opens up further in his second observation. So here, as you can see in the slide, the second observation highlights the potential impact of complex systems of systems, which an autonomous vehicle essentially is made up of. It's a collection of systems. It's not one system, it's many systems. And their impact on one another, it can be critical. So the example here shows that issues about data privacy, for example, can impact impact the system as a whole. So you can see that the potential impact of a security breach with the telemetry system, and particularly attacking the key, and the effect it may have on braking. Basically, you can override it and you can crash the vehicle. Now, the potential impact of such conflicts is much greater than just one vehicle or a small number of vehicles implicated in an individual failure, but could scale across the network of vehicles, as our interview put it, when you actually do connect these things up. Furthermore, assumptions made in testing, for example, the absence of packet queuing across a wide area network, may also have global impacts. As our interviewee again puts it, in order to make sure the ABS does the right thing, it is extremely important at an interval of somewhere between 100 and 1,000 times a second that you control the coordinated action of a wide area network across your vehicle. You don't have to stop messages going through. All you have to do is slow them down, make sure they get through in the wrong order, or exceed the number of lost packets that you can afford to get in relation to this. Now, observation 3 extends the previous one and informs us that you can't rely on algorithms to manage problems at scale. Now, in this example, stimulating the braking system on a connected vehicle may potentially propagate across the network and affect millions of vehicles. There's no assurance that the problems occurring at this level can be managed by the algorithms designed to control the ABS or any other component part of a complex system of systems. As our interviewee puts it, we're going to get stuck, and the impact on the conduct of human life is going to be immense. That's going to be extremely dramatic when these kind of things happen. And I think, just to pick up on a point that Ram was making earlier, when you're doing simulations as part of the testing regimes, I don't think people are simulating things at this kind of scale. 40 million vehicles being impacted, for example, in the ways that we're talking about. I don't think that's been happening yet, but people can tell us we're wrong in discussion. So the fourth observation makes it perspicuous that machine learning algorithms, and indeed software more generally, doesn't need to be compromised to compromise an autonomous vehicle. So in this example, the ABS can be triggered by gaming the headlights on the vehicle. As our interviewee puts it, I don't even have to get into the IT. The ABS can be triggered just by turning on the headlights and flashing them at a certain rate, which causes misinformation to come out of the headlight sensors. For every vehicle that's got such a system, I could turn the brakes on and all I've got to do is flash the headlights. And of course, the general point there is that it's not just about a single vehicle. Again, this could potentially be done at scale. The fifth and final observation is that the digital models that underpin autonomous cyber-physical systems will always be incomplete and subject as such to potential attack, particularly given that they spend most of their time in changing operational environments, not in design. There is then, as the quote on the slide makes clear, need to factor operational change into the lifetime of safety-critical autonomous systems to assure their continued trustworthiness post-design and development. Now, as our interviewee puts it, understanding how all this fits together and being able to respond is fundamental to actually understanding how to do anything trustworthy. So that's a brief overview of the observations that have dropped out from the initial study. I will say, before I just consider the implications of it, that we've also got a second study underway. It's looking at margins of error in machine learning. Again, it's based on informal interview. This time it's looking at medical devices. So the study's ongoing, and I can't say too much about it, other than that it's becoming quite clear that margins of error are not only technical in nature. Okay, so we're not just talking about false positives, false negatives. We can also see that there are social aspects to the nature of margins of error. So where a device is situated within a human workflow, that can impact understanding of margin of errors. There's agreement and disagreement between expert users, because a lot of these devices are not replacing people, they're augmenting their work, okay? And the disagreements and the differences, that has an impact on margins of error. There's obviously a difference between human and machine performance metrics. Customer requirements can impact margin of error. There's a trade-off between automation and decision. And then, of course, there's a bunch of methods and measurements that have to put in place to persuade regulators. And these all, again, shape understandings of margins of error. Now, we'll have a lot more to say about this in due course, but it's clear that there is more to margins of error, as I said, than false positives, false negatives, and the ways in which you work with those things. In terms of study 1, I think there's some clear implications that drop out of it, and particularly in terms of understanding the interdependencies between a complex array of parts, of an autonomous system that's connected to a network. I think the primary thing that you can take away, it's written large on the slide there, and I'm sure you'll understand it by now, is that adversarial testing is going to be a really important tool in the bag. All the examples we've been talking about are a result of adversarial testing, whether it's poisoning machine learning, or slowing down packet queuing on a network, or subverting light detection. It's all the result of adversarial testing. Now, one of the things that strikes me when I look at the sort of governance literature around this is that there's really not a lot of recognition of the need for adversarial testing, not in the governance literature, okay? A little bit, for example, from Google, who recommends it, as does the US National Security Commission on Artificial Intelligence, and of course, NCSC, or the National Cybersecurity Centre, also recommends it generally. Recommends penetration testing, as they call it. That's a general thing. In governance, however, adversarial testing does not seem to be particularly pronounced. There's a lot more in the design literature, but governance, it's really not, and it's certainly not assured. If you look at the EU proposal, the proposed EU AI Act, well, it makes mention of adversarial testing, but twice, once in a recital and once in Article 15, and then only in passing in Clause 4, which mandates that high-risk systems, and I quote, shall be resilient as regards attempts by unauthorised third parties to alter their use or performance by exploiting system vulnerabilities. So the need to avoid attack and subversion is mandated, or probably will be, but adversarial testing is not. Nonetheless, it would appear to be a critical part of the mix insofar as it surfaces weaknesses and vulnerabilities in the design of complex systems of systems, and thus provides a key means of identifying risks of harm, risks which may subsequently be mitigated through design and development. Now, avoiding, or at least mitigating harm, is writ large in the EU proposal, and key to the definition of a high-risk system, i.e. a system that may have a significant harmful impact on persons' health, safety, or fundamental rights. So in this respect, adversarial testing potentially impacts governance in two ways. One, it appears relevant to the risk management system proposed in the EU regulation, where adversarial testing might play a systematic role in the evaluation of risks, which may emerge when a high-risk system, and again I quote, is used under conditions of reasonably foreseeable misuse, as stipulated in Article 9(2)(c). And secondly, it appears relevant to Article 61, which will require the providers of high-risk systems, and again I quote, to systematically analyse the performance of their systems throughout their lifetime. Now, it seems to us that adversarial testing should not be an optional bolt-on, but something that is built into the governance of autonomous systems that impact human safety, whether it be directly, for example, in failing to apply the brakes on a car, or indirectly, e.g. through the impact of failure at scale on supply chains. Indeed, it's hard to see how providers could meet the proposed requirement to evaluate high-risk systems under conditions of reasonably foreseeable misuse in any other way, and threats to the integrity of autonomous systems will, for the most part, only actually occur once they are in service. Okay, so that's me done. That's some highlights from the first study. If you've got any questions, please feel free to fire away. With the caveat, don't ask me too much about the EU Act. I'm not a legal expert. Let's save that for the lawyers. But I'll do my best in between. So over to you, Ram, and anybody else who would like to ask any questions.
So I see that there's a lot of activity in the chat window. So we picked up some of it, but
let's have a look. Yeah.
And I think Peter has a question, so we should take it.
Peter, shall we start with Peter? Hello, Peter.
Hi there. Obviously, I think that's a good study that you've been doing there. I think one of the elements that is important to emphasise out of that is the emergent properties coming out of complex systems. So the idea that most of our systems we don't get to design anymore, that we're using AI as part of, they're formed to do things ephemerally. So I guess looking at the governance that fits in relation to that and the relationship between infrastructure and things that run on infrastructure is probably an area that you'll look at going forward.
We would certainly like to, yes. Yeah, and I think the emergent properties, the complexity, systems of systems and how problems that emerge in use, I take it, is also a critical feature to look at there.
Because I know some of the studies, a lot of the studies that we've done, adversarial is one category, but essentially many of the adversarial situations are stimulation of emergent properties that you don't happen to like. So it's essentially stimulating inherent aspects of the systems that we're now relying on. And certainly when you're looking at the design bits of this stuff, that seems like an important aspect to consider. But thank you, that was really great.
Thank you, Peter, much appreciated. Questions. Andy, was the braking system, Stuart Anderson, was the braking system supplied by a third party and integrated into the vehicle? So my understanding was that it wasn't any particular braking system. It was a raft of braking systems. They didn't just pick on one system. In that way, they couldn't blame any particular manufacturer. Several systems were looked at. Was there discussion between the vehicle manufacturer and the braking system provider on the risk share? I have absolutely no idea, none at all. Were they sharing several systems in the car? I don't know if they were sharing, but there were certainly conflicts that arose, as we mentioned. How was the training of the machine learning components managed for the overall vehicle? I haven't got a clue, to be frank. There are things we come back to. Ditto with the DevOps. I couldn't tell you what the DevOps process was. So yeah, they're just the bits we've got so far, and it might be possible to go back and explore further issues if we thought it were profitable. I think that's a question to discuss with the Lord. Does anybody else have any other questions, or shall we move on?
Andy, there's one more from me.
Hi, let's do it. By the way. Who?
Do you want me to say it rather than just read it? I mean, so.
Sorry, where are you at?
So do you have a description of the DevOps process? I mean, there's a mention of DevOps, I think, in your observation 5.
No, we don't. We don't have a description of DevOps process either. That wasn't part of the conversation. It's just that. That
seems like rather salient to the kind of thing that we're talking about, because you're talking about evolving the system on the basis of operational experience.
That's right, and I think that's
that's very antithetical to the approach taken, let's say, to safety critical systems. I mean, I would think that many vehicle engineers would be quite surprised that somebody was using DevOps. But anyway, okay, thanks.
All right, thanks, Stuart. Anybody else then? Or are we done? I think the DevOps bit is critical, isn't it? Learning over a lifetime, and not the idea that you're not just done in training and testing, and then that's great, chuck it over the wall and then crack on.
I think this is an extremely timely issue because I think, was it last week when they had the back and forth with Tesla's latest FSD update 10.3, 10.4, where I think on Sunday morning, Elon Musk announced that it's going to be put out, and then in the evening it was like, no, we're not quite doing it because we're not happy, and then the next morning it was out there, and it's a time scale that's just not seen with cars before, right? But it's happening. It's out there today as we speak.
Yep, it's happening, and more of it's going to happen, isn't it? So we should factor it in somehow. Okay, over to you, Ram.
Yeah, I think next we